cut paste from the brochure, the poster that was shared with me for today's lecture, and used it right here. So this is gonna be a lecture on disaster management during COVID-19. How the design thinking approach and how the idea and implementation of ICT, information communication and technologies, can be applied for surveillance uh, in COVID-19. So I hope you all had a chance to open this link. If you open this link, you will be somewhere asked to dismiss and skip. So wherever you see an option to dismiss and skip, just use these options. Just dismiss, don't agree, and just skip it. And this should take you to this first question. Okay. Is my screen visible to you, Mansi?
Yes, yes, it is
Okay,
visible.
great. This is just to get a sense okay, whether we are going to be, unfair with any of our participants by using one language, which is not the most preferred language. So it seems like English is most preferred, but there are still some people who would prefer कि हम इसको English और थोड़ा गुजराती के साथ mix करके अपना session रखें. So which is fine. We'll use a mix of language throughout this presentation. So what is the role of field of architecture in the field of health and disaster? See, this is where I would request our participants to, if they can unmute their mic one by one, and if they can answer this question particularly. Any of them, not just students, but any of them, even the faculties if they are there. I would rather love to learn from the faculties also. So what do they understand the role of architecture in the field of health and disaster? By the way, this picture was taken at Delhi Domestic Airport. You can see a staircase and you can see an escalator next to it. So is it a healthy design? Anyone can answer. Like anyone can reflect on this.
Sir, I believe
Yes,
it is
sir.
architect Srinath here, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I believe architecture helps. It lays out the infrastructure. Like for example, in a hospital where we have to have emergency rooms, you need to have the specific amount of ramp that's required. So it's easy to take that emergency person inside into the ward, or maybe place the emergency room accordingly, so that someone who's come directly from a car accident or something like that, they can be addressed directly. Otherwise, if the emergency room is on the top floor, then you can't. I mean, you have to go through the lift. The time is wasted, and every second will count in such an emergency.
Right.
So it plays an infrastructural role like that.
Right. That's a great answer, actually. Sorry, I missed your name. Your name?
Srinath, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Srinath. So that was really
Thank you.
a good answer, actually. So that is where the role of architecture comes in health after someone is not healthy. But how does architecture plays a role in keeping people healthy? I mean, you must have also heard, you guys have heard about the healthy building designs, right? So how well the buildings or the built environment is designed to encourage people to be more physically, mentally, socially active plays an important role in well-being of the society, in well-being of the people, in well-being of the community that uses that architecture, and not just the hospitals where where one reaches after falling sick or after falling ill. So definitely there is a role of architecture in hospitals. No, there is no doubt on that. But then also keeping people healthy. See, we build parks. Why do we build parks? Right? It is not just a recreational space, but for people to spend some time. But it is also to with the idea to keep people healthy, to make people more walk, to make people, be around ambience which can, give them mental peace. So rather than, these stickers that you see on the staircases, skip calls, not steps, or mobile phone, not in stairs. Could there be a better messages which could encourage people to use these, to use these staircases and not the escalator next to it? There could be better messages which could encourage people to use the staircases and not the escalator next to it. See, first thing, they should not be, in my understanding, they should not be next to each other. There could have been a better design where the escalators were on one side, or let's say right in the front of the main door after entering in the auditorium or entering in the concourse. People should first see the escalator, the staircases, and then at one point they can see the escalator also. Like, we have to make people put a little effort to find the escalator, the easier option, the unhealthier option. It should be there because there are people who require escalators who are physically not fit and they need escalators. But then if you are providing both the options right next to each other, we know our nature that we are so lazy that even being healthy, even being physically fit, will prefer to choose the staircases and not the prefer to choose the escalators and not the staircases next to it. So this was just to give an idea, क्योंकि I was wondering कि हम लोग क्यों disaster के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं और health के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं with the people of architecture. Do they also understand कि क्या important role है architecture का, the field of architecture in health and disaster? Disaster, we all know, the field of architecture is contributing immensely in disaster resilient infrastructure. So there is no doubt on that when it comes to infrastructure part. Moving further, I'll talk about some basics of COVID-19. So we all know that it originated from the a city called Wuhan in the Hubei province in the China back in 2019 in December. This is the timeline of COVID-19. Some of you must have, COVID-19 अब बहुत पुराना हो चुका है. We all know about it, the entire story of COVID-19. But just a quick recap: the first case in Wuhan came on 12th of December in 2019, which was reported by China to the local WHO office in China in December 2019 itself, on 31st December. On 7th January, a novel coronavirus was identified, which was causing this, clustering of pneumonia cases, which were of unknown origin. लोगों को pneumonia हो रहा था, but किस कारण से हो रहा था ये किसी को नहीं पता था. And then on 30th January, the World Health Organization declared it as a public health emergency of international concern, and that was the same day when India reported its first case of COVID-19. Anyone remember from which state?
I think Kerala.
That's great. Yeah, so it was from Kerala. And then the virus was renamed as SARS coronavirus 2. SARS stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, because coronavirus was not new. It happened earlier also. So this was the second strain of coronavirus which was causing severe acute respiratory syndromes. The respiratory system gets severely attacked, and it's primarily was a disease. It's primarily a disease of respiratory system. So that's why SARS coronavirus 2, the virus was renamed from nCoV, novel coronavirus, to SARS coronavirus 2, and then the disease was renamed as COVID-19, which is COVID coronavirus disease. So, and why 2019? Because it happened in 2019. So this happened on 11th of February, and by 11th of March 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic, एक वैश्विक महामारी. हम सबको पता है इसका ट्रांसमिशन कैसे होता है. It's a droplet transmission. There were news about that it is also an airborne transmission, but there was no substantial and sufficient evidence to claim that it primarily happens because of airborne transmission, but primarily droplet transmission. And droplet transmission क्या होता है? When an infected person coughs or sneezes, खांसी खाता है या even बोलता है, तो हमारे respiratory tract से बहुत छोटे-छोटे droplets जो होते हैं वो निकलते हैं, and when they come out, they fall on the surface in front. सो आपके सामने कोई टेबल है या कॉमन सरफेस है लाइक टीवी रिमोट और टेलीफोन और थिंग्स लाइक दैट, सो द ड्रॉपलेट्स फॉल ऑन दैट, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द साइज ऑफ ड्रॉपलेट्स, रेस्पिरेटरी ड्रॉपलेट्स जिसके अंदर कोरोना वायरस होता है, व्हेन अ इन्फेक्शियस पर्सन coughs or sneezes or talks, the size of that droplets are 1 to 2 meter, right? And they can travel to a certain distance, not too far. So अगर हमारे सामने कोई खड़ा भी है, 2 मीटर वाली बात क्यों आई? क्योंकि it can at least travel till 2 meter. The 2 meter it can travel at least 2 meter. So अगर हमारे सामने भी कोई खड़ा है, and if that person is also not protecting him or herself, then they may also get infection through inhaling those droplets from the infected person. So primarily ये droplet infection है, जब हम किसी infected person के सामने कोई कॉमन सरफेस है जहाँ पे वायरस हो सकता है बिकॉज ऑफ द कॉफिंग एंड स्नीजिंग, उसको टच करते हैं लाइक फोन या मोबाइल या रिमोट, और फिर हम अपने देन वी टच आवर आईज, nose, or mouth, then it can get into our body. So this is the main mode of transmission that was known, largely known, of COVID-19. Signs symptoms हम सबको पता है. The common symptoms, signs symptoms initially were coughing, shortness of breathing, difficulty in breathing, fever, chill, which was very common, body ache. Basically any viral flu, sign symptoms you can experience. Later there were also cases of vomiting and diarrhea, and there were newer symptoms of loss of taste and smell that were seen in many cases in case of COVID-19. What was the distribution of illness? So majority of infected people are either have mild or moderate symptoms, or they remain asymptomatic, but they were still a spreader. So we have seen that close to 81%, close to 80% people had either mild or moderate symptoms. What does this mean? This means or they were maybe they were asymptomatic. What does this mean? या तो उनको symptom ही नहीं हुए, और अगर हुए तो they didn't require hospitalization, right? They were at home only, और उनको home based treatment मिली, and they recovered. There were around 40% cases which were falling under severe category, and they required hospitalization, but not critical. There were critical cases which were around 5%, which required intensive care, like उनको ICU में admit करना पड़ा, and they required life support, जिसे हम ventilator कहते हैं, या pressurized oxygen mask लगाना पड़ा, या इस तरह की या heavy medicines का यूज करना पड़ा. So this was the categorization, distribution of the illness among all the COVID-19 cases that we saw across the globe. I'm sure आप लोग कई लोगों ने मेरे colleague है डॉक्टर रिपॉल कांजिन का लेक्चर लास्ट वीक अटेंड किया था. It was primarily on the basics of disaster risk management, and he is perhaps one of the best instructors and teachers I have seen who can talk about or teach about the disaster risk management in today's era. So I will take a quick recap, because I am going to talk about COVID-19 from the DRM perspective, disaster risk management perspective, and then how we used in ICT in handling the COVID-19 or in managing the COVID-19 in terms of doing an active surveillance for COVID-19. So मैं थोड़ा सा डिजास्टर के बारे में फिर से बात करूंगा. डिजास्टर क्या है? अगर हम डेफिनेशन से जाए तो डिजास्टर मीन्स a catastrophe, a mishap, calamity. I'm just going by the definition, or a grave occurrence in any area arising from a natural or man-made causes, or by accident or negligence, which results in substantial loss of life, or human suffering, or damage, or degradation of environment. And it is of such a nature or magnitude as to be beyond the coping capacity of the community of the affected area. This is by the Disaster Management Act of India 2005. This is how it is defined in our DM Act 2005. Now again, I have questions. Is COVID-19 fitting into the definition of disaster? And if yes, is it a natural disaster or is it a man-made disaster? If you guys are still on that that screen, that link, you can still open it and answer this question: is COVID-19 a disaster or not? Okay. Let's take 5 more seconds and then we'll lock this poll. So majority of us are still thinking that it's disaster. Uh, I'm good to see that there are people who are having a different opinion. I appreciate that, but I'm locking it now. So my question is to both people with the both from both the sides of opinion. Uh, so those who are thinking that it is a disaster, can one of them answer why it is a disaster? We just saw a definition of disaster, right? So why do you think it's a disaster? Any one of them. And there is nothing wrong and right answer.
So basically, people did. My name is Nirmisha, and I
Yes.
think it's disaster because people did feel certain shocks and stress
Yes.
during this pandemic, and maybe in terms of economical aspects or in terms of various other aspects like transportation or livability aspects. So that's why I think it counts as a disaster.
Okay, Nimish, that's great. And if anyone from the other side who think that it's not disaster can reflect on why do they think that it's not a disaster? Anyone? And again, there is no right and wrong answer here. Anyway, so this, if you remember, I said that WHO initially declared it as a public health emergency of international concern. So there is a difference between emergency and disaster. But then when it is a pandemic, it is a disaster. And we just saw the definition of disaster from India, but more or less we have the same definitions from other countries and from the the global frameworks also, which define disaster. So it is of magnitude which is beyond the capacity of the affected area. So we have seen the catastrophic effects of COVID-19 on health of the people, on economy. There was no single, by and large, no single aspect of the economy and society which was not affected by the COVID-19 and which did not require external, forces or external resources to cope with, which means it gone beyond the coping capacity of communities being affected. So it was definitely a disaster. Thanks, Nimesh, for that wonderful answer. So, sorry. So yeah, again, we talked about disaster. Now, what is disaster risk? Disaster risk is the potential loss of life. See, it's a probability. It is the potential loss of life, injuries, potential loss of destroyed or damaged assets, which could occur to a system, a society, or a community in a specific period of time. As I said, it's a probability, so determined probabilistically as a function of hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and coping capacity or capacity. So it's clear that disaster risk, see, disaster is an event which is a consequences of an event, hazardous event, which has a risk to occur or which has a risk which can be addressed. And what are the factors that play a role in that disaster risk are these: hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and capacity. It's clear from the formula that you can see on the screen that if the intensity and frequency of a hazard increases, the disaster risk would go up. If an exposure increases, the disaster risk will go up. If the vulnerability of the population of the assets of the infrastructure increases, the disaster risk will go up. But if we increase the capacity, the coping capacity, the disaster risk will go down. So, what is the hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and coping capacity in terms of COVID-19? Hazard, of course, again, I'll go with the definition. It's a process or phenomena or human activity that may cause loss of life, injury, and other health impacts, property damage, social and economic disruptions, or environmental degradations. So, what is the hazard in COVID-19? If COVID-19 is a disaster, then what is the hazard? What caused this disaster to happen? It's of course SARS coronavirus 2. Just to give you guys a perspective of how big this hazard is, how big this enemy or this threat is from this slide. On the very left, you see is a depiction of SARS coronavirus 2 size, which is of 0.13 micron, which is 1/10 of an average bacteria size. And an average bacteria cell is 1/10 of a dust particle, which is PM10 reflected here, which is an 1/10 of an human hair in diameters. So you can understand that how big is this enemy which the entire world is fighting against, and that the small size, the invisible virus itself, that is the strength of this enemy that the entire world is facing right now. Exposure. So who all are exposed? We all know that the entire world, almost no region, almost no country now is left from COVID-19. Almost the entire world is exposed to the SARS coronavirus 2. By yesterday itself, there were more than 10 crore cases across the globe, with more than 23 lakh deaths across the globe. In fact, India itself had more than 1 crore cases by today morning. If you can again go back to your polls and answer this question here. Mm-hmm. So we can clearly see that majority of people are from Ahmedabad itself. There are few people from Jamnagar and few from Kutch and from Mumbai also. Great. All right. So this is just to give you a perspective that if you are from Gujarat, we know that it is the Ahmedabad district, city primarily, but the Ahmedabad district that was the worst hit of COVID-19 amongst all other districts in Gujarat, and then came Surat, and then Vadodara and Rajkot. So this is the level. Does that mean that there were more people exposed in Ahmedabad as compared to Surat, or as compared to Vadodara or any other district for that sake? So what plays a role in enhancing or increasing your exposure or exposure of a city as compared to the other city or other district? That is something that I want you all to think of when we talk about exposure. Are you exposed to coronavirus too at your home when you are at home? Do you think that you are exposed to coronavirus too? Mm-hmm. I'll give 10 more seconds to this question, and then I'll also request some of you who are answering no to reflect on this, please. All right. So, can anyone answer who have answered no? Why do they think that they are not exposed to coronavirus, SARS coronavirus 2 when they are at home? Anyone? Okay, in that case, maybe those who answered yes, if they can answer, why do they think that they are exposed to coronavirus even when they are at home? Anyone?
I think when we are at home, the chances are less, right?
Right. Okay.
Be affected, yeah, so to be affected by COVID. But
Mm-hmm.
still, as people are going for the basic things like groceries and vegetables and milk and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
if anyone is going outside and coming back to home,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so if that person is not following the basic guidelines like washing hands or sanitizing the products which are coming from outside, and
Mm-hmm.
people are there at home, maybe they have a chance to be affected by COVID.
Right. So again, as I mentioned, the disaster risk is a probability of loss, a probability of impact, a probability of injury. And disaster risk is a function of hazard, uh, exposure, vulnerability, and capacity. We know that the hazard, is a phenomena which has the potential to cause the injury or impact, which in case of COVID-19 is SARS coronavirus 2. So that virus is an hazard. Exposure is a situation of people and assets. We saw that in definition in the hazard prone area. So do we think that there is any area which is not hazard prone? There is any area where the hazard is not present? Hazard, by hazard, I mean the SARS coronavirus 2 is not present in today's scenario. Do we think there are places where we can be safe? Do we think that in our home there won't be any SARS coronavirus 2 present?
There might be, sir.
There might be, right? We just saw the size of that virus. Even after we take any precautions, we can't, deny with the fact that there could still be possibilities that we are taking the virus to our homes by one way or other, right? So it's tough to deny with the fact that we are not exposed to the SARS coronavirus 2 when we are inside our homes. So the third factor, which is vulnerability, it is the condition determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors or processes which increase the susceptibility of an individual, a community, assets, or a system to the impacts of hazards. So those factors, physical, social, and economical factors, which makes a community or an individual more susceptible towards the hazard, towards the SARS coronavirus 2 in this case. So what are the factors? Let's say, individual factors. Let's say the age of people. Let's talk about the social factors here. So the age of the demography. So the age of the people, the higher the age would be, there are higher the chances of fatality, which we saw. So countries with higher average age had to face higher case fatality. Case fatality means those who are those who die because of the infection. So the higher the average age of the country would be, the higher the chances of a higher case fatality would be. So we saw that people, or majority of deaths among the infected people occurred if in the age groups above 60 or 70 and more, whereas in the lower age groups there were infections but not the fatality, not the deaths. So the age, the comorbidities like pre-existing medical illnesses, for example, diabetes, cancer, hypertension, or other heart diseases, makes people more vulnerable towards any hazard, in our case, towards SARS coronavirus 2. So those getting infected, having pre-existing medical conditions, are at higher risk of dying as compared to those healthy, who are healthy ones, the younger ones. Similarly, people living in slum communities, people living in poor hygienic conditions are at higher risk, are at higher susceptibility, or more vulnerable towards the hazard, towards the impacts of hazards as compared to those who are well off. Let's talk about the economic vulnerability. So we have seen that the higher the GDP, see, ideally, I just mentioned that people living in poor, hygienic conditions are more vulnerable to the impacts of hazard, SARS coronavirus 2 in this case. But this graph shows something else. The higher the GDP per capita for the country, the higher the cases per million population in that country. How does this happen? Shouldn't it be the other way, like जितना ज़्यादा GDP होगा country का, उतने कम cases होने चाहिए? Why does this happen? Can anyone reflect on this? So on your y-axis, there are COVID-19 confirmed cases per million population. Per million population पे कितने COVID-19 के cases थे? And on your x-axis, it's GDP per capita. So the higher the GDP, the higher the number of COVID-19 cases per million population. Shouldn't this be other way around? Like the more developed countries should be having less number of cases. Why there are more number of cases in richer countries and not the poorer countries? Anyone can reflect on this.
Hello.
Yeah,
I'd like to. I'm Kritika. I'm currently an Anand Fellow. This was just a thought. I don't know if it's true,
yeah.
but I think in places where you have, like in the developed countries, this is just a thought. Maybe the urbanization is more. So when that happens, I am assuming that more people are living closely together in urbanized spaces, and that somehow reflects in higher GDP. And that is why what is happening is that because of the close proximity of people and the infrastructure that is designed in a way that people have to be so close, it aids in the transmission of the virus, and that is why in more developed countries you have higher cases of COVID.
So, Kritika, that was an excellent answer. But I guess someone else was also trying to reflect on this. So maybe we'll take that answer and then discuss about your answer.
Yeah, it's me. I'm also an Anand Fellow, and Kritika is my batchmate.
Yeah.
I had similar viewpoints. I had the same aspect of immunity building is maybe stronger in developing countries, but again, it's just a thought.
So again, well taken. Your thought is also, your reflection is correct. It is also in the line. So there are multiple reasons which could answer this, may not be just one. So higher the GDP, I mean, the richer the country, the better the health infrastructure, the more they are testing and the more cases they are getting, right? This could be one possible reason. Urbanization, to some extent, yes, but if the country is richer, they are also supposed to have a good, healthcare infrastructure. So we have seen cases logically, for any infectious disease outbreak or epidemic, dense population is definitely a factor which increases the, the cases. But it plays a role as an intermediary factor. It is not directly responsible. It also depends on how good is the health infrastructure and how good are the resources available, health resources available for the communities, and several other factors. So both of you, your points are very much correct. So these are some of the factors that contribute in higher number of cases. So yeah, great answers. Then comes the capacity. It's the combination of all strengths and attributes. So capacity basically is the reverse side of vulnerability, we can say. So the lower, the more you will increase your capacity, the lesser will be your vulnerabilities. But there was a very famous phenomena that we all heard during COVID-19 pandemic. Was flattening the curve. What exactly was that flattening the curve is where I would like you all to take a look at this video. I hope this will help you understand somewhat better than what you already know about flattening the curve.
एक तेजी से फैलते हुए ग्लोबल पैंडेमिक कुछ ऐसी दिखती है, क्योंकि उसको रोकने के लिए बहुत कम या कुछ नहीं होता। इस वजह से बहुत सारे लोग बीमार होते हैं कम टाइम में। आहिस्ते से फैलने वाली पैंडेमिक कुछ ऐसा दिखता है, जहां कम लोग बीमार पड़ते हैं और ज्यादा टाइम तक बीमारी चलती है। इन दोनों में से कौन सा तरीका सही है, ये इस लाइन पे डिपेंड करता है, जो हमारे हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम की कैपेसिटी है, मतलब कितने बेड्स, डॉक्टर्स या रेस्पिरेटर वगैरह हमारे पास है। साइंटिस्ट को ऐसी तेजी से फैलती हुई बीमारी से डर लगता है, क्योंकि ये हमारे हॉस्पिटल्स पे बहुत प्रेशर बनाती है। कमाल की बात ये है कि भले ही दोनों तरह उतने ही लोगों को वायरस इन्फेक्ट करेगा, पर तेजी से बढ़ने वाले ग्राफ में ज्यादा लोगों की मौत होगी, क्योंकि हॉस्पिटल्स में इतनी सुविधा नहीं होगी कि वो सब बीमारों का ख्याल रख सके। इसका मतलब अगर वायरस धीरे से फैलता है तो हमारे हॉस्पिटल्स बीमारों का ख्याल रख पाएंगे और इस तरह काफी लोगों की जिंदगी बच सकती है।
So we know that the entire idea of flattening the curve was to delay this peak that we see here. So एक साथ, if a lot of people will reach to the hospitals, our hospitals will go beyond the capacity of our hospitals, beyond the number of beds, number of doctors that we have to cater our population. So to avoid this situation, the lockdowns and measures like social distancing and other measures were taken to ensure that this curve gets flattened, and rather than getting all the cases in a shorter duration of time, we get these cases over a period of time. This also gives us a time, this also gives us a time which we buy to enhance our capacity. So we have seen that we built in ad hoc hospitals, temporary hospitals and care centers during our lockdown phase. हम सबको पता है कई सारे COVID centers, hospitals, temporary hospitals start हुए थे, even at the scale of stadiums, hotels में starts हुए थे. So this gives us the time to not just flatten the curve, but also to enhance our capacity. So this line that we see here goes further up when we take measures, when we took measures like lockdown and social distancing. Now, going further, COVID-19 from the disaster management viewpoint, we have seen what is disaster's definition, what is the disaster risk, what are the factors that contributes in it. COVID-19 is definitely a global public health disaster, which enforced, which brought in the International Health Regulation 2005, which provides recommendations to the countries for certain measures like international travel restrictions and other things in case of any such infectious disease pandemics. So that also came into the picture at the international level. In India, COVID-19 pandemic evoked certain acts and regulations like Epidemic Disease Act 1897. Primarily these two acts, Epidemic Disease Act 1897 and the Disaster Management Act 2005, which were used to enforce lockdowns and certain other measures throughout this COVID-19 pandemic in India. It also evoke the Information Technology Act to ensure that along with this pandemic, there is no, infodemic goes by uh, alongside the COVID-19 pandemic. So cutting down the misinformation and wrong information that were floating around on COVID-19, खास करके हमारे WhatsApp और Facebook universities पे. One more poll. So is it a natural disaster or is it a man-made disaster? Mm-hmm. 10 more seconds and then we'll lock this response. All right. So can anyone who think that it is a man-made disaster answer why do they think it's a man-made disaster? Anyone? Or anyone who thinks it's a natural disaster can answer why she or he thinks it's a natural disaster.
I think it's still a mystery, sir.
It's still a mystery. Okay. Your good name, sir?
So my name is Nirmay.
Yes, Nirmay. Why do you think it's a mystery? What makes a disaster natural or man-made?
I am just thinking about its origin, what I have read from during this pandemic when it was in like. So people were saying, or there were some of the things which said that some country had made this thing, and some of them was saying that maybe it's a virus which got muted with the time. So that's
okay. So you are talking about the virus, the origin of virus, whether it was man-made or natural.
yes, sir.
So virus is an hazard, right?
Yeah.
And disaster is a consequences of hazard only, or is it a consequences of other factors also that we just saw in the disaster risk definition?
Sorry, sir, I didn't understand.
So a disaster, is it a consequences of just a hazard, impact of hazard, or is it a consequences of other factors as well that we just saw in the disaster risk definition? The exposure, vulnerability, and capacity.
Yeah, there are other consequences as well.
So it is a result of all these four factors, right, and not just hazard. So what you are saying is the hazard, but what you are saying is that there are theories and there are rumors around that the SARS coronavirus 2 was not natural, but it was man-made. It was developed in a laboratory, and then that's how it originated. But that's still a hazard. It's not a disaster. Disaster happens when all these factors play a role, right? When it is beyond the risk increases to a certain level, the risk of disaster increases to a level goes beyond the capacity of the affected community. And what plays a role in building the capacity of a community is decreasing the vulnerabilities, and that is still in hand of people, in hand of societies, in hand of communities, in hand of governments, so in hand of all the institutions. So any disaster is never a natural disaster. Any disaster is always a man-made disaster. Yes, hazards can be man-made or natural. So in our case, SARS coronavirus 2, although there are theories that it's man-made, it is still not proven. So it will consider SARS coronavirus 2 as a natural hazard. But this disaster, the COVID-19 pandemic, which is the disaster, is not natural. It's man-made disaster. I hope that is clear. Okay, thanks.
That clear.
Yes. So this famous cycle that you might have also, some of you must have seen in the previous lecture also, not this one, but a similar one in lecture of my colleague, Dr. Paul Kanji. So any disaster risk management cycle has different phases, which is, you first try to prevent the disaster to happen, then you try to take measures to mitigate, prevent as in to avoid risk, and then mitigate is to limit the risk, and then even after all these measures, if the disaster or if the hazardous event is certain to happen, then you prepare for it in terms of providing an early warning to people that it is going to happen, and we have to be prepared to take certain measures. And then after it happens, you respond to it, and later you recover and build back better to reduce the risk in the future. So this is how a classic disaster management or disaster risk management cycle looks like. So why to do DRR? DRR basically is disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management. Let's look at this from these 5 Ws and 1H angle. So how and when to reduce and manage the disaster risk? We just talked about different phases of disaster risk management cycle. So how to reduce or manage the disaster risk? One, you can prevent it, which means you avoid the risk, which is less costly. Then you try to mitigate the risk, you limit the risks. Then if even after all this, if the hazardous event is certain to strike, then you take preparedness measures, which also includes response to current hazard events. So to reduce the risk or to manage the risk is not always before disaster, or before the hazardous event strikes. It is also during and after the hazardous event strikes. So it is also when you prepare for it, and also when you respond to it, you are reducing the risk of disaster. Definitely, if you can prevent it, it will be less costly. But when you have to reduce the risk in the phase of preparedness and response, it is going to be a costlier option than preventing the disaster in most of the cases. So who to contribute in reducing and managing the disaster risk? Everyone. I'm sure that my colleague emphasized a lot and talked a lot about the systemic nature of the disaster risk in his presentation last week. But let me put it here again, that it is everyone's business to reduce and manage disaster risk. And the systemic nature of COVID-19 global pandemic has further emphasized the pressing need for multi-sectoral collaboration in disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management. We have seen that a public health emergency, led to nationwide lockdowns, which directly impacted our financial on our financial insecurities, which led to migration issues. But then public health emergency also directly impacted the education. Lockdowns impacted the education. They together impacted the transport sector. So things were interlinked. They were not working in silo, but they were affecting one and each other. So one thing is clear, that the risk is not linear as we think of. It's not just one event led to another and another led to third one, but there were dependencies between these systems, between these sectors, which were also impacting each other at the same time. So what exactly do we understand then from disaster risk governance? So if there is disaster risk, we need to reduce this, we need to manage it. What does that mean? That means we need to govern it. So what is disaster risk governance? A system of institution mechanisms. So these are some of the international known definitions that I'm citing here. It's the system of institutions, mechanisms, policy and legal frameworks, and other management to guide, other arrangements to guide, coordinate, and oversee the disaster risk reduction. Similarly, the UNDP defined it as disaster risk governance refers to the way in which public authorities, civil servants, media, private sectors, again, I have highlighted some of the words here: public authorities, civil servants, media, private sector, and civil society. They coordinate at community, national, or regional levels in order to manage and reduce disaster risks. So it is not just role of public authorities, which are governments or media or private sector or civil servants. It's responsibility of all of the society to communicate in order to manage and reduce the disaster risk. So let's take a case study of technology-based surveillance system, which is called AXIS, Advanced COVID-19 Syndromic Surveillance System. So what exactly is the surveillance? Can anyone tell me what is surveillance? Hello? Anyone?
I think it's like to check something or to keep an eye on something.
Exactly. So it's basically just to keep an eye on something, to keep a track, to trace and then track. Primarily, very speaking very in a raw definition. So it's basically just to keep an eye and track the situation primarily. So the Gujarat Institute of Disaster Management, from where I come from, in partnership with other institutions, the Gujarat National Informatics Center, and then primarily the Gandhinagar district initiated this surveillance system, which was to track and which was to trace and track the suspected COVID-19 cases in initially in Gandhinagar district and then scaled to many other districts. So what exactly is this? It's an it's a dual application available on web portal also and then available on the mobile application also. Where it was done in Gujarat. Again, started from the Gandhinagar district. Why syndromic surveillance? So syndromic surveillance. So syndrome basically means a collection of signs and symptoms. So we have seen fever, cough, and certain other cardinal signs and symptoms which were leading to the diagnosis of COVID-19. It was not like anyone was taken to the testing facility. The testing was done strategically. So those who had sign and symptoms which were matching with the sign and symptoms of COVID-19 were encouraged to go under for testing of COVID-19. So syndromic basically means a set of signs and symptoms which indicate a certain disease or medical condition. So it's proven, syndromic surveillance is a proven way, especially during pandemics, and that too in low resource countries with the use of technology. Why COVID-19? It's a simple mobile app technology to identify the suspected COVID-19 cases. How did we do it? Let me go on the next slide. So the idea was to trace suspected cases which were not getting caught in the routine surveillance system of
Hello, Abhyant?
Yeah.
Hello, you are not audible.
Am I not audible?
Yes, now it is audible.
Okay. Okay. So so the idea was to catch cases, suspect cases which were not getting traced in the routine surveillance of the health department. I'm not sure if you all know how the health department carried out the surveillance for COVID-19. They carried out the house-to-house surveillance. They also used the mobile app called Arogya Setu, which almost all of us have downloaded. So people self-reported themselves on Arogya Setu app, and those who reported themselves ill were then called by the call centers from the government health departments to check whether the conditions that they were reporting in Arogya Setu were serious or not, and whether they required further investigation or not. So that was one of the way government used the technology, and then, as I mentioned, they did house-to-house surveys. But the issue was with Arogya Setu, people were reporting, but there were a huge number of false reporting. So one, people were not sick, but they were still reporting themselves sick. So that was an issue, the credibility of self-reporting, which has been on stake in many cases. And then in house-to-house surveys, it is possible that when you reach, to a house of a case, the person might not have any sign or symptom, but later the person develops the sign and symptom, and you miss them in your house-to-house surveillance or in your house-to-house case surveillance or rounds. So now let's talk about self-medication. What is self-medication? Self-medication is, people used to consume, purchase and consume drugs even without prescription of doctors directly from the medical stores. And the prevalence of this self-medication is very high, unfortunately, in India. It's as high as more than 90%, more in urban areas as compared to rural areas. For example, this more than 90% figure is from Delhi city itself. There are cases of people, buying medicines directly from the medical stores without the prescription of doctors or without any, recommendations, is as high as 90%. What could be the possible reason of this high prevalence of self-medication? Anyone?
Hi. People probably think that they don't want to visit hospitals because you would find the most amount of COVID patients there. So maybe to safeguard themselves, they want to self-medicate at home.
Mm-hmm. So this figure is in general. This is not from COVID time. This is in general. Like, people tend to buy medicines primarily from the drugstore in first case, and then rather than going to the doctor. So there is a high self-medication prevalence in India. So yes, in COVID-19, what you said is correct. But otherwise, why the prevalence of self-medication is so high in India, and in any other developing or underdeveloped countries for that matter? So one is true, during COVID-19 time, it's because of fear. People didn't want to go to the hospitals and get them, put them in the risk of getting contracted with the virus. But why otherwise it is so high, the prevalence? Anyone else? Okay, so there are many reasons. It's because of time. People don't have time to go to the doctor. They find it easy to buy the medicine directly from the drugstores. It's also a matter of money. A lot of people cannot afford going to the doctor first, and then paying the fee to doctor, and then paying the cost of medicine at the drugstore. It's also a behavioral aspect. There is also an aspect of literacy, and then stigma, which played a major role in case of COVID-19. So the stigma is primarily what made this, which could have made this go further high in case of COVID-19. People were under fear of going to the doctors or getting tested, that we saw during the initial phase of lockdowns, when there was no policy of home isolation, basically. So yes, stigma further could have further impacted this prevalence of self-medication go further high. Number one. Number two, drugstores were still the services under which were open under essential supply services during lockdowns as well. So drugstores were accessible and people had fear of going to the doctors and getting tested. So there was an assumption, there was an hypothesis that people are going to the drugstores and buying the medicines and not, getting caught or getting reported during the house-to-house surveillance, or neither through the Arogya Setu app. So the idea was simple. This is how the primary healthcare works in India. In rural setups, there are primary health centers which caters to a designated population of 30 to 20,000 people, depending on the hilly or tribal areas of predefined villages. So suppose ABC primary health center is there, it will cater 10 or 20 villages which will cover around 30,000 population, but those 10 or 20 villages will only fall under this primary health center. These villages will not fall in any other primary health center. And similarly, in urban areas, there are urban health center or urban primary health centers which cater to around 50 to 60,000 populations, and they also have designated wards. So, for example, in Ahmedabad, if there is a ward called Waraj, so Waraj ward will have will cater the population of Waraj ward only, and not the population of other wards. Not the population of other wards. By this I mean that if they'll be doing any surveys or if they'll be doing any outreach programs, they'll be doing for the designated wards only. Similarly, in rural areas, if this PHC, ABC PHC will do any outreach or surveillance or survey program or any other program, they'll do for their designated villages only. So doing house-to-house survey of any 10 villages will depend on which primary health center they are assigned to. So that health center will only do the house-to-house surveys of those designated villages. So now, people with having these syndromes, signs and symptoms, which were fever, cough, cold, sore throat, breathing difficulty, diarrhea, which were the cardinal signs and symptoms of COVID-19, tend to go to the drugstores and private doctors also to purchase the medicines, right, for these signs and symptoms without any prescription. What we made them do is we developed this Access portal, a mobile-based application for the medical store users and for the health centers also. So when a person, suspect case, purchases a medicine from the drugstore or goes to a private doctor and asks for medicine for these complaints, the drugstore or the private doctor has to, that suspect patient has to provide his or her information to this drugstore or private doctor, which they feed in to the Access application in the real time. So what were those information? They were primary, basic contact details. So name, village, in case of urban areas, which urban area, right? Village after taluka, basically. So which district the patient belongs to, then which taluka the patient belongs to, then which village the district belongs to, and these were all through drop down options in the mobile app, given in the mobile app. So they were as per the LG directory which is there in place, used by the government. So this, and then the patient's name, age, and contact detail, as in mobile number, and then the complete address. So this was this information provided by the doctor, provided by the patient to drugstores and private doctors. Only those patients who were suspected, like who were having these signs and symptoms, not the others. So if you are going to buy medicine for hypertension or diabetes, you are not supposed to provide the information. But if you are buying the medicine for these 6 cardinal signs and symptoms, you are supposed to provide the information to drugstores, and they are supposed to feed in this information in the application, which reaches to the PHC, primary health center, or urban primary health center in real time. So there is no lag. So if a patient provides the address information, which is of XYZ village or ABC ward, and if that ABC ward is falling into urban primary health center 1, or if that XYZ village falls into the designated villages of primary health center 2, that health center will get the information of that suspect case in real time. So he has now that case, suspect case the doctor from this primary health center or the doctor from this urban primary health center has that case in real time available to him or her to work upon. So these are just some of the screenshots of of the mobile application. So the drugstore will feed in the details of patients. They'll select the signs, symptoms, which taluka, which village, and then simply say it was very simple. And similarly, when I'm not sure if you noticed it or not. So this drugstore entered a patient called Janak Patel, and these were the information which reached to the primary health center Prantia in the real time. So you can see the case Janak here, right? And then the doctor of this primary health center can send his health team to this patient's house to request the patient if they want to avail the facility provided by the government of testing and home-based isolation care. So if the patient agrees, the patients were provided with the services. And then there was a web portal which was for the decision makers to keep a track on how the districts, how the talukas and how the health centers were performing in terms of tracing and testing the suspect cases. These are some of the screenshots of those decision support web portal used by the administrators. It's one of the sample summary report generated for the Gandhinagar district. So you can see there are different talukas and municipalities falling in the Gandhinagar district. What were the number of suspect cases reported between the period? So this was all automated. You just had to feed in, the figures here, and you can generate these reports in the real time. So it was very helpful for decision makers. You can see here that the number of RT-PCR tests, the positivity rate for RT-PCR was 55%. The test positivity rate for rapid antigen was 30%, and overall it was 20% during this period of time for Gandhinagar district. Does anyone of you know what was the test positivity rate? So going further, it reached to 8 districts from 1 district in Gandhinagar. Started in August 2020 from Gandhinagar, it reached to 8 other districts and several other talukas and drugstores, and they all became part of this surveillance system. So can anyone tell me what is the test positivity rate of the Gujarat state or India? The latest or whichever you remember. So test positivity rate basically is if you conduct 100 tests and then how many of them turn up to be positive. So if suppose you are conducting 100 tests and there are 13 people who are positive, the test positivity rate would be 13%. So anyone has any idea how much it was for India or Gujarat state? Anyone? No worries. So our figure, I mean the test positivity rate received from this system, which was still as high as 16.19%, was much higher than the test positivity rate of Gujarat state or Gandhinagar district or India, done through the other means of surveillance, the house to house, I mean finding the suspects and then testing them through house to house surveillances or Arogya Setu or other means. So this was much higher than the other means of surveillance, is what we observed in our findings. So yes, why surveillance? I mean, why access? Because it is the test positivity rate was very high, which means it was helping us catch the right suspects and utilize the resources in surveillance more rationally. The tracing of COVID-19 cases in India, it helped in tracing COVID-19 cases in an initial stage. So one goes to one visits the drugstore to buy the medicine in the initial phase of disease. एक बार आपको न्यूमोनिया हो गया था कोविड की वजह से, तब आपको हॉस्पिटल पहुंचना ही पड़ेगा. But at least when you had fever, when you had mild cough, you visited medical store first. So if you are able to trace the case right there in the initial stage of disease in the well advanced time, then you are avoiding the further spread of disease in the community. So it was helping us to catch the right suspect in initial stage of the disease. It was helping us in complementing and supplementing the states and districts' efforts in COVID-19 surveillance. And this is scalable to any place in India, and for any disease surveillance, for other diseases also. And lastly, yes, it was real time. So that was the biggest factor, the biggest positive factor of this entire system. It can also be scaled, used for planning the COVID-19 vaccination strategies, COVID-19 vaccinations, appointments and systems also. So yeah, it can be scaled to that also. Going back to the definition of disaster risk governance, it is the system of institutions, mechanisms, policy, and legal frameworks and other arrangements to guide, coordinate, and oversee disaster risk reduction. This is one of the screenshots from the tweet made by the National Informatics Center, where we can clearly see that the Gujarat Institute of Disaster Management, which is an academia, the Collector Gandhinagar, which is a government administration, the FDCA, which is Food and Drug Control Authority, which is a business authority primarily, the NIC, which is technology, and then people. They all played a role in reducing the risk of COVID-19 disaster, at least in these 8 districts. So again, who to contribute in managing disaster risk? Everyone, because it's systemic, and the systems are made up of everyone and not just one. I think this is my last slide. So thank you so much.